I should have turned back the moment the desert went quiet. The sun in northern Arizona was sinking, flattening itself into a red smear behind the mesas, and the heat still clung to my skin like a fever. I remember thinking the world looked baked, cracked earth, brittle shrubs, and a horizon that trembled as if something enormous was breathing beneath it. I had driven past Saguaro Hollow more times than I could count, but that night the land felt different, as if something ancient had shifted under the dirt, shaking off sleep. I'd pulled over because of the dog. It stood in the middle of the road, unmoving, as if carved from bone-dry clay. Its fur was patchy, its ribs sharp beneath stretched skin, and its eyes, God, its eyes, reflected too much light, like mirrors catching a flame that wasn't there. When I stepped out of the car, dust swirling around my boots, the dog tilted its head at an angle no living creature should manage. Then it opened its mouth and released a sound that was almost a human gasp. And then it bolted, into the brush, gone in seconds. I wanted to believe it was just a sick coyote, heat-struck and dying. But something in its posture had unsettled me in a way that felt older than instinct. As if the land itself had pulled a warning tight inside my chest. Maybe that's why I didn't turn around. Maybe some part of me understood that running wouldn't help anymore. My name is Elena Ward. I'm 29, and I don't scare easily. Not after everything that happened last year. Grief has a way of hollowing you out, leaving nothing soft or breakable. People keep telling me I need to process what happened. But how do you process a disappearance? How do you process a voicemail from your sister that ends mid-breath, followed by silence? The police searched, the rangers searched, I searched. And still, the desert kept its secrets. I came back tonight because this was where her hiking group found her pack. Because I can't move forward until I know what happened. Because running from the desert hasn't worked, so maybe facing it will. I told myself that my fear, this not always sitting under my ribs, would become useful eventually. Some people call it trauma. I call it a compass. It points toward the things I've tried to avoid. And tonight, it pointed straight at the abandoned ranch sitting half a mile off the highway. The place had been deserted for decades. Locals called it Red Hollow Ranch, though the boards on the gate had long since crumbled. A single windmill leaned crookedly against the darkening sky, its blades barely turning. The building's old house, horse barn, collapsed shed, looked sun-bleached and starved of purpose. But I wasn't alone. Even before I stepped through the rusted fence, I felt eyes on me. You don't grow up in Arizona without learning the language of the land. The way silence thickens when a predator is near. The way heat seems to shift around something that should not be there. Inside the ranch boundary, the air felt heavier. Still hot, but almost held. My boots crunched against dry soil as I moved toward the barn. The dog, the thing, had vanished somewhere in this direction. I kept expecting to hear a growl or claws or movement in the brush, but instead I heard something far worse, my sister's voice. "Elena!" It came from behind me, soft, uncertain. My breath stopped in my throat. I spun around so fast my vision blurred. No one stood there. "Elena, help me!" This time the voice sounded farther away, stretched thin across the dry wind. Too perfect, too familiar. Every syllable matched memories I'd spent months trying not to replay. I wanted to run toward it. God, every part of me wanted to, but something primal anchored my feet to the dirt. You can't trust what mimics. I forced myself toward the barn instead. The sun had fully slipped beneath the horizon now, leaving the desert washed in bruised purple. That was when I noticed the footprints near the entrance, deep, wide animal tracks. At least they started as animal tracks. After 3 steps, they changed shape, became longer, narrower. Toes stretched unnaturally far apart. And then, inexplicably, they straightened into something that looked almost human. My stomach tightened. The desert doesn't do that. Animals don't do that. But something here did. As I stepped into the barn, a rush of cold air swept across me, impossible in the lingering heat. Dust motes spiraled like tiny dying stars. The rafters creaked, as if something heavy had just moved. I raised my flashlight, its beam trembling not from the battery, but from my hand. Something watched me from the far corner. I felt it before I saw it. At first, it looked like a shape crouched low to the ground, shadow clinging too tightly around a body that was almost animal but not quite. A long limb twitched, then another. The shape unfolded slowly, joints bending wrong, bones shifting beneath slack skin. My light caught its face, or what it was trying to pass as a face, and I felt the world tilt. Features arranged themselves like clay pressed into a mold. A smile too wide, eyes too still. It resembled my sister for a second, but only in the way a broken doll resembles its owner. It whispered my name with her voice. And then the thing did something that still knots my throat when I remember it. It began to stand upright. Vertebrae cracked like twigs. Shoulders rotated with a sickening grind. The creature grew taller, taller than any person I'd ever seen, until its head brushed the rafters. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint glint of its eyes. My breath came in sharp bursts, and the air tasted like copper. "Elena," it crooned. "Don't run." I didn't run. I couldn't. My legs refused to obey. But as the creature stepped forward, something inside me broke free. A survival instinct sharper than fear. The moment its hand stretched toward me, long fingers scraping wood, I lunged sideways and bolted through the barn doors. The desert greeted me with open silence. Behind me, something scrambled across the dirt on too many limbs. Not chasing, just watching. Enjoying, like it was learning me, like it had chosen me. I reached my car, lungs burning, hands shaking so violently I fumbled the keys twice. When the engine finally turned over, I didn't look back. I only saw the ranch disappear in my rearview mirror. But even from the highway, miles away, I could still feel it. The thing in the barn. The thing that wore pieces of my sister like a mask. And as the last trace of daylight died, the desert whispered something I didn't understand, but understood enough to fear. It wasn't finished with me. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I made it back to the motel on the edge of Holbrook, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I sat on the bed with the lights on and the curtains open, watching the parking lot as if the creature might stroll across the asphalt on borrowed legs. Every sound, footsteps outside, the hum of the vending machine, the metallic click of the ice maker, sent a cold pulse through my spine. By dawn, my throat was raw from breathing too hard. But when the sun finally rose, warm and indifferent, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Running had changed nothing. The desert had followed me. Around noon, I went to the only place where locals still talked about legends without laughing it off. A dusty roadside shop called Desert Relics and Remedies, the kind of place that sold dream catchers made in china and jars of purified moonwater. I wasn't expecting answers. I just needed a direction, any thread that didn't dissolve when I touched it. The bell over the door chimed as I entered. The shop smelled like sage and hot plastic. Behind the counter stood an elderly Navajo man I'd seen once or twice over the years. Weathered face, hair pulled back into a neat gray braid, eyes that seemed to read a person in a single breath. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You saw something," he said before I even reached the counter. My chest tightened. "I don't know what I saw." He shook his head. "You do, but you don't want the name for it." I hesitated. "I think I heard my sister's voice." The man's expression softened, but not with pity, more like a warning wrapped in empathy. That desert has a way of taking voices from those who won't be using them anymore. My breath faltered. "What do you mean?" He motioned for me to follow. We walked to a small table covered in hand-carved figures, animals, humans, shapes I couldn't identify. He picked up one figurine, carved from dark wood, its body twisted into a half-human, half-animal form. "This is a story people whisper but never claim," he said quietly. "A person who breaks the old laws, takes power that wasn't meant for them, and loses their soul in the process. They can wear any shape, any voice, but what they become underneath..." He tapped the figurine once. Is hunger. My mouth felt dry. A skinwalker. The word tasted wrong, like I'd stolen it. The man nodded once. They do not show their true form unless they want you to lose hope. Hope, I almost laughed. The creature in the barn had peeled that out of me like old wallpaper. But legends leave things out, he continued. Some say they only mimic, but sometimes they choose someone, fixate on them, learn them. The bell on the door chimed behind us. A woman entered, talking on her phone. Her voice was cheerful, normal, grounding, but the man's warning washed over me like a cold wind. What do I do? I whispered. He studied me quietly. You already crossed its path. It won't forget you. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give without lying. His honesty hit harder than any dramatic prophecy could have. I left the store more frightened than before, and more certain that going back to the ranch was inevitable. I drove until the sun dipped low again, mocking me with its familiar heat. The land stretched endlessly, brush shimmering in waves of dry light. I kept glancing at the passenger seat, half expecting to see someone sitting there. A shape, a shadow, a face. My phone lost signal 20 minutes before I reached the ranch. By then, the air tasted metallic again. My dashboard lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The world felt thinner, the same feeling I'd sensed last night, as if the desert's crust were nothing but a fragile lid over something moving beneath. I parked far from the entrance this time. My body thrummed with fear, but it also carried something new, clarity. I wasn't here for closure. I wasn't here to face my trauma like a therapist might suggest. I was here because the creature had taken something from me, and I wasn't leaving until I understood what. The boundary fence came into view as the sky bruised toward twilight. Red Hollow Ranch looked even more hollow in daylight, warped wood, collapsed porch, a well that had long since dried. The air shimmered with heat, but beneath the warmth was a cold current brushing my skin. Then I heard it. A low, almost conversational voice drifting from behind the house. "Elena, you came back." My heart stopped mid-beat. The voice belonged to my sister. Soft, shaky, exactly like the voicemail. But this time it didn't sound stretched or warped. It sounded perfect. Too perfect. I stepped closer. "Where are you?" Silence. Then, "Elena, please, I can't move." Pain twisted my chest. My mind flashed to nights spent waiting for updates, to hours spent imagining her trapped somewhere, injured, calling for help. It was the kind of thought that carved you hollow. But tonight I recognized something beneath the voice, a rhythm, a cadence, a deliberate gentleness. The creature wasn't just copying her voice anymore, it was performing her. I circled the house, boots crunching on brittle earth. The air grew colder with every step. At the corner of the building, I stopped. Something stood in the shade of the porch. At first it looked human, female, slight, with long dark hair tangled by the wind. My breath hitched. For one impossible moment, my sister stood before me. The tilt of her chin, the shape of her shoulders, even the small scar near her eyebrow, but then she smiled. And the smile was wrong. Too wide, too rehearsed. The muscles didn't move like they belonged to her face. The figure tilted its head, observing me with eerie stillness. "Don't be afraid," it said gently. "I'm here." The real fear didn't come from its voice or face. It came from the way it blinked. Slow, mechanical. Like a child practicing a motion it had seen but never understood. "You're not her," I whispered. The skin around its cheeks rippled, stretching, slipping, as if deciding whether to hold its shape. It leaned forward, movements too fluid and too stiff at the same time. "You want her back," it said, mimicking my sister's sorrow. "I can show you where she is." My stomach dropped. "Where?" The creature lifted one hand. The fingers elongated, joints cracking softly as they extended far too long. It pointed toward the hills behind the ranch. "The place where she changed." A tremor ran through me. "Changed?" For the first time, the creature faltered. Its face flickered. My sister's features replaced for a fraction of a second by something raw and stretched thin like sinew pulled over bone. Then the mask snapped back into place. It wasn't lying. It was remembering. I took one step back. Instantly, the creature mirrored me, taking one step forward, head lowering like a predator studying its prey. "You can't leave now," it whispered. "You crossed the line." My pulse hammered. "What line?" Its smile widened, splitting too far. "The one that separates what you fear from what you'll become." I turned and ran. The creature's footsteps followed, light at first, then scrambling, claws tearing earth, limbs reshaping mid-movement. I didn't dare look back. The desert roared around me, wind ripping across the ground. My car was too far. My breath burned. I reached the dry wash behind the ranch just as the sun died completely. Darkness swallowed the land. Something landed behind me with a thud. Slow, heavy, patient. "Elena," it rasped. Not my sister's voice this time, but mine. Perfectly mine. I froze. Hearing your own voice spoken by something that wants to wear your skin, that's the kind of terror that reaches inside you, finds the place where your fear sleeps and wakes it violently. "Don't run," it said. I ran anyway. Behind me, the creature laughed in a voice that wasn't mine or my sister's, but something ancient and delighted, like it had waited years for this single moment. And as I fled into the night, I finally understood. It hadn't chosen me by accident. It had been waiting, learning, becoming. And tonight it wanted me to see exactly how well it had learned. The desert had swallowed the last traces of light when I stumbled into the canyon behind Red Hollow Ranch. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but adrenaline kept me moving. Every step felt like wading through a viscous memory, the sand shifting beneath me as if the land itself were conspiring with the thing that hunted me. Somewhere far above, a coyote howled, its cry hollow, mocking, but nothing compared to the sounds following me. The subtle, almost imperceptible scraping of claws on stone, the whisper of air that shouldn't be there. I didn't stop running until I reached the cluster of sandstone formations the locals called the shaman's teeth. Jagged rocks loomed like broken totems. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the ground. The canyon narrowed, walls pressing close, and I realized the creature had driven me here deliberately. This place pulsed with the kind of energy only whispered about in the desert's oldest legends. Somewhere here, it would be strongest. I crouched behind a boulder, listening. The air was thick, scented with dry earth and something fouler, almost metallic. And then I heard it, the voice again, this time perfect. Mine. "Elena, come out." My hands were slick with sweat, heart hammering. "I'm not. Don't lie," it interrupted. The words were soft, almost coaxing, but every syllable carried a weight older than fear itself. "You can't hide from me," I swallowed. For a moment, panic overtook thought. But then, deep inside, a memory stirred. A memory of last year, of grief so sharp it had hollowed me out, leaving nothing but edges. I realized something. My fear had always been my enemy, but here it could become my weapon. I stepped from behind the boulder. The thing waited at the canyon's edge. Its form shifted with the shadows. For a heartbeat, I glimpsed my sister's face. For another, the raw, sinewy stretch of the creature beneath the mask. Limbs elongated and contracted unnaturally, head tilting at angles no human or animal should manage. Its eyes glimmered with awareness, studying me like a chess master sizing up a pawn. "You can't beat me," it hissed, voice a jarring symphony of mine, my sister's, and something older, something feral. "You're mine." I took a deep breath, letting the dry desert air fill my lungs. The fear that had gnawed at me for months, the loss, the grief, it had sharpened me. I moved deliberately, stepping into the open canyon floor. The creature tensed, and I realized it expected me to flee, to react irrationally. But I wouldn't. I focused on its pattern, its mimicry, the subtle rhythm in its stalking. Every lunge, every twitch, every flicker of a mask, it followed logic. It calculated, and I could see it. For the first time, I could see the cracks in its form. The thing thrived on fear, yes, but it underestimated the one thing stronger than terror. Resolve. I sprinted toward a narrow passage between two monoliths, forcing the creature to follow. The space was tight, the walls pressing close. It had to contort unnaturally, claws scraping stone, body folding in ways that seemed impossible. I glanced over my shoulder, its eyes locked with mine, and then it grinned, too wide, too many teeth. A corner approached, jagged rocks forming a natural trap. I dove to the side, rolling into the shadow, and threw a handful of sand into its face. Its scream was inhuman, raw, and yet muffled by the desert wind. It lunged blindly, and I slipped past, heart hammering. The passage opened into a small cave, a shrine of sorts. Totems carved into the stone, symbols worn by centuries of wind and sun. My sister's voice echoed faintly from the walls, distorted. I pressed my back against the stone, chest rising and falling rapidly. The creature paused at the cave entrance, body coiled, mask shifting, fingers twitching. "You used your fear well," it whispered, "but it is not enough." I forced myself to look at it. "I'm done running." Its head tilted, amused, almost curious. Then it lunged. I didn't move. I waited. The moment its claws extended toward me, I twisted my body, using its momentum against it. It crashed into the cave wall with a sickening crack, the air filled with the sound of bones and sinew flexing unnaturally. The thing recovered instantly, snarling, eyes narrowing. But I had learned its rhythm. Every motion it made, I anticipated. I became the observer. I became the storm. I struck out at its face, not my hands, but my voice. I shouted every memory of loss, every scream of my sister, every whisper of grief that had haunted me. The sound, raw and human, vibrated against the stone, against the creature. It recoiled, staggering, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second, revealing sinew, teeth, and something darker. Consciousness older than the desert itself. It roared, a sound that ripped through the canyon, shaking dust from the ceiling. And then silence. I waited, chest heaving. Nothing moved. The desert swallowed the echo of its roar. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A shadow flickered across the far edge of the cave. The creature had recovered, standing taller, thinner, almost ethereal. Its shape shifted rapidly, adopting a new mask, one I didn't recognize. Not my sister. Not me. Something entirely different. Its eyes gleamed with knowledge, intelligence, amusement. It had survived, and it had adapted. I stared, frozen. The desert around me seemed to pulse in approval. The skinwalker's grin widened, stretching impossibly. Its limbs contorted and merged with shadow, becoming something that should not exist. "You taught me well," it hissed. "Now the game begins again." I ran. Out of the cave, across the desert floor, under stars that burned white-hot above jagged mesas. My boots pounded the earth, lungs on fire, heart hammering with the knowledge that what I had fought was still alive, and smarter, faster, more relentless than ever. The desert was quiet again, but I knew it was watching, waiting, learning. And somewhere far behind me, shifting in the sand and shadow, a thing with endless faces smiled. The game was far from over.